Over the past few years, many Western economies, ranging from Europe to Western-aligned Asian economies and the United States, have been accusing China of engaging in unfair trade practices. This, as many Western leaders said, has distorted global markets and disadvantaged foreign businesses. But is this really true? Has China really been engaging in unfair practices to give their businesses and economy an advantage? Well, to understand this, it is first important to understand what unfair trade practices mean in general. Unfair trade practices typically involve actions by a country that give its domestic companies an unjust advantage over foreign competitors. And in plain sight, you can already tell how this works in China. Many foreign companies have raised concerns about the challenges they face when operating in China. The US government itself has accused China of using foreign ownership restrictions to require or pressure technology transfers from US companies to Chinese entities. This is one of the common forms of unfair trade practices. Another form is subsidies. Subsidies happen when a government gives financial support to domestic companies, reducing their production costs and allowing them to sell goods at lower prices. Then, there's also the well-known intellectual property, IP, theft. IP theft happens when a country or its companies steal trade secrets, patents, or proprietary technologies from foreign companies. Fourthly, dumping is also a form of unfair trade practice. When a country sells their goods in another country at prices lower than in the domestic market, often below production costs, to drive out competition. Fifth, currency manipulation is also a form of unfair trade practice. This happens when a country deliberately devalues their currency to make its exports cheaper and imports more expensive, giving domestic producers an edge. These are amongst the forms of unfair trade practices. And in all of these forms, China has been accused by many economies globally for violating them. But just how does China violate them according to the accusers? Well, let's talk about each of these one by one. The very first is no other than intellectual property theft. This is one of the most significant accusations against China. There are vast numbers of reports out there outlining just how China has been stealing intellectual property from foreign companies. But the number behind the cost of IP theft is staggering. According to an article published by the CSIS, the article said that the US has probably lost between $20 to $30 billion annually from Chinese cyber espionage. And the cumulative cost is so much more, which the article notes may reach over $600 billion. This IP theft can then undermine the incentive for innovation and harms the competitiveness of companies that invest in research and development. According to a report by the US Chamber of Commerce, US companies lose billions of dollars each year due to IP theft, leading to job losses and reduced economic growth. One of the biggest examples of IP theft that anybody can see today is no other than the Chinese company called Huawei. Huawei was accused, and even charged back in 2020 by the US Justice Department for racketeering and stealing trade secrets from US firms. These firms, ranging from Cisco to SolarEdge, have either accused Huawei or filed an official lawsuit for these IP thefts. But look at where Huawei is now. It is one of the world's biggest companies out there. Here's a graph on the global telecom equipment for 2023, which, as you can see, shows that Huawei holds a massive 30% market share. Is this rise as a global provider of telecom equipment the result of stolen intellectual property? Well, that is what many critics accuse Huawei for. But what's also true about Huawei, and arguably many other Chinese companies out there, is that they are spending billions of dollars for the development of their own technology. For instance, here's a graph on Huawei's R&D spending per year. Here, you can see just how big their R&D spending is. For the latest year available for 2023, They had R&D spendings of over 164 billion yuan, which is approximately $22.5 billion. That makes them one of the world's largest R&D spenders. Here's another graph on the largest R&D spenders in the top 10 biggest companies in Nasdaq. If Huawei were to be put in this list, you can already see just how much they overspend some of America's largest businesses. So, if the critics argue that Huawei is stealing IP secrets, then it is also true that they are investing heavily in creating their own innovations. Beyond IP theft, there's also forced technology transfers. Forced technology transfer refers to a practice where foreign businesses are required to share their technology with Chinese partners as a condition for market access. This often involves joint ventures, where foreign firms must transfer key technology to their Chinese counterparts. Many American firms have raised concerns about this practice, claiming it puts their intellectual property at risk. For instance, companies in the automotive and aerospace industries have reported being pressured to share proprietary technology to gain access to China's massive market. Then, thirdly, there's the well-known state subsidies and government support. China's government is known to provide significant support to its domestic industries through subsidies, favorable loan conditions, and tax breaks. These subsidies lower production costs, enabling Chinese companies to sell goods at prices lower than their competitors from other countries. For instance, within the electric vehicle and battery energy technology, China has funneled hundreds of billions of subsidies to position China as a leader in green technology. Here's a graph on the industrial policy spending for China's EV sector in types of support, data from the CSIS. Here you can see just how much support the EV sector has received, whether in the form of rebates, sales tax exemptions, infrastructure subsidies, and so on. In total, from 2009 to 2023, the Chinese government support cumulatively totaled $230.9 billion. That is no small amount, and it is one of the reasons why China has emerged with a big market share in the electric vehicle world. Here's a graph on the global market shares of top 10 BEV manufacturers, year-end 2023. Here, you can see that while Tesla holds over 19.9%, BYD and many other Chinese companies, collectively, have more than Tesla, which is the sole American company on the list. Here's another graph on the global market shares of top 10 PHEV manufacturers, year-end 2023. This graph, unlike the top 10 BEV manufacturers, showcases how far ahead BYD and Chinese companies are in plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Now, the problem with these subsidies is that they distort the global market by allowing Chinese companies to outcompete foreign businesses, often driving them out of markets or leading to job losses. These practices can result in trade disputes and tariffs as other countries attempt to protect their industries from unfair competition. This is one of the reasons behind President Biden's tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Here's a fact sheet detailing the tariffs rate that President Biden's administration's on electric vehicles from China. Here, you can see that they have outlined extensive subsidies and non-market practices, which they say would lead to substantial risk of overcapacity. Hence, they increased the tariff rate on electric vehicles from 25% to over 100%. The Biden administration then claimed that this will protect American manufacturers from China's so-called unfair trade practices. Fourthly, the US has also accused China of currency manipulation. Back in 2019, the US Treasury has labeled China as a currency manipulator, but it reversed that just a couple of months later. This designation, however, is subject to debate. Analysts often point to the correlation between China's large foreign exchange reserves and the undervaluation of the yuan for the cause of China's currency manipulator status. Here's a graph on China's foreign exchange reserves, data from the World Bank. Here you can see just how substantial China's foreign reserves are, and how they have remained among the largest in the world, totaling over $3 trillion in recent years. Critics argue that by maintaining such massive reserves, China has historically intervened in currency markets to keep the yuan undervalued, making its exports cheaper and more competitive globally. But of course, China has denied these accusations, stating that its foreign exchange reserves are managed to stabilize its economy and not to manipulate currency values. Lastly, and finally, we also have dumping. Dumping involves selling goods in foreign markets at prices lower than their normal value, often below the cost of production. A notable case of dumping is China's steel industry. The European Union and the United States have both filed complaints with the WTO about Chinese steel exports being sold at unfairly low prices. The reason why China can do this is because they are the world's largest steel producer. Here's a graph on the largest annual steel producers globally. You can see just how much China produces, more than half of the world's total for the year 2023. But the accusations here is that when China sells or dumps these steel at artificially low prices, it can force foreign companies to reduce costs, often by cutting wages or quality, or even shut down operations. This practice undermines fair competition and can cause long-term damage to industries in importing countries. So, are these reports and accusations by Western economies true? Well, again, it is hard to truly say who is right or wrong. Both sides have their argument. But to truly understand who is right or wrong, we can turn to the World Trade Organization. The WTO is the main forum for resolving trade disputes. Several cases have been brought to the WTO alleging unfair trade practices by China. For instance, the European Union initiated WTO proceedings against China's forced technology transfers. Then, the US also repeatedly brought cases concerning Chinese steel subsidies and IP theft. The WTO has ruled against China in several instances, supporting the claims of unfair trade practices. For example, the US succeeded in cases involving Chinese export restrictions on raw materials and rare earth elements. The WTO ruled that these restrictions violated global trade agreements, as they gave Chinese manufacturers access to cheaper resources while increasing costs for foreign competitors. These rulings could then highlight China's violations. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.